God, the family of God, are we going to be in what I call a position of strength? Raise your hand if you want to be in a position of strength when we come out of this. Amen? So today, we're looking at the life of Joseph. And I want to just give 3 quick points that I feel that we can learn from Joseph's example of how he lived and dealt with this continuous change. That's just a fancy word for saying the change is not happening in such a linear way that it's just a natural change in evolution. But this continuous change just means it's change all of a sudden, and it has no relationship to what happened before. So, let's turn to the scriptures. Genesis 37, verse 3 to 5. Point number 1 is that Joseph was a man of unwavering vision. And I feel like if we're going to navigate these discontinuous changes in our culture, that we can learn from Joseph on how to be men and women of unwavering vision. Let's read the verses. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. Isn't it interesting that Joseph was this young boy? He was the favored son of his father, but his brothers hated him without reason. Joseph faced adversity, even though he didn't do anything wrong per se. And at that moment where adversity came, Joseph had a dream. Dreams come when God is getting ready to do something. Amen? And so Joseph has a dream. And it says in verse 19, it says, the brothers are seeing him coming. He says, here comes that dreamer. Joseph was known to his brothers as a dreamer. They said to each other, come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns of a well, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. Isn't that interesting that all Joseph did was he had a dream and he shared it? You ever had a dream? Has God ever spoken to you in such a powerful way about your life or about your future, about your family, about something, and you thought, this is really good stuff. I had this dream. Like, this is really good. And then you go to share it with someone, and you're thinking that they're just going to love this dream. And it actually has the opposite effect. They discount you. They say, oh, it must have been the pepperoni last night that you're eating. Are you sure it's from God? Question, they doubt. And you were thinking that you begin to talk about this dream. You begin to move forward in a direction of the dream. You begin to take steps and talk different and act different and say, God has given me this dream for my life. I'm gonna move forward in it. And as soon as you do that, boom, opposition comes. What does it do for all of us? It basically makes us question ourselves, right? We begin to say, did God really speak to me? Did God really give me this dream? Has that been your experience? Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. Have you been in a situation where you thought you were really being directed by God and all of a sudden you faced opposition? Joseph was a dreamer. It's difficult to discern from the text, but I'd like to think that Joseph was a man of unwavering vision. And I believe Hebrews 11:22 bears that out. That's just the Hall of Faith where it talks about all the heroes of the Old Testament and how even Joseph had an unwavering vision to say that when you exit Egypt, and you head back into the promised land, take my bones with you. He knew it was going to happen one day. He was a man of unwavering vision. When you begin to get a hold of what God is directing you towards, you can expect opposition. This isn't to discourage you, but to encourage you today. If God has given you a dream of what could be, what should be, and what can be, and you begin to share it, you begin to walk in it, you begin to work it out, you begin to declare how things are going to change around here, you begin to talk different and act different, watch out for the snapback. Everybody say snapback. Snapback. Ever seen those elastic bands, and when you pull it really tight, boom, snap, ow, right? That's pretty authentic ow right there. That's good. Really, I brought you in with that pain that I was just feeling, right? You all sense what that's like. You see, change is like that. Have you ever heard in this season of change since COVID and the pandemic and the filtering, have you ever heard this question being asked? Can't we just go back to the way things were? Maybe we've all asked that. I know I have. I felt like, can we just go back to the world as normal? Sorry, no. We will get a sense of normal, but it will be new, whatever it looks like. And you're part of businesses, you're part of families, you're part of organizations, you're part of communities in various measures and aspects, and you know that when you try to bring about change, the dominant culture doesn't allow it. Because it's more comfortable to stay with the status quo than it is to adopt the change. And as Christians, as followers of Christ, we're called to bring about change. We're called to be the light to the world, the salt of the earth. We're called to have impact. We're called to make a difference. We're called to do something of impact and change in the world. And when we go and take our first step out, because we feel we're being directed by God, what happens? The elastic band snaps, and the dominant culture tries to hold us back, tries to prevent us from making the changes. Anybody here? Anybody experienced the snap? No. And so, in one sense, snap back can encourage you to show you you're on the right track. You're starting to have an impact. We need to be people, men and women, of unwavering vision. Unwavering vision. In Genesis 39, verse 2 to 5, it says this: the Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. He lived in the house of his Egyptian master. Verse 3. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did. Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. Joseph had to be a man of unwavering vision, because the very ground that Joseph was living on was taken from him. For Joseph, the floor was lava. In a moment, everything changed. Joseph, all of a sudden, woke up to another world. One day, he's a shepherd, he's helping his family, he's helping his brothers, and in a very, very short span of time, he's in Egypt working for this guy named Potiphar and just trying to help him in his household. He experienced a great amount of change. But through it all, we never hear once of Joseph complain. Instead, what do we read first? We read that the Lord was with him. Let me encourage you today. Whatever change you're facing, whatever new world that you have woken up to, I want to tell you, God is with you. That God has a purpose and plan, and that He is unwavered from the difficulties and the challenges of the day. That the vision of God for your life will come to pass. that none of what's happening comes as a surprise to God. Isn't that good news? That we can sit here in confidence, in faith, being men and women of unwavering vision, to know that God is true and what He has spoken will come to pass. Great place to say amen. Thank you, brother. Can I get a second? Amen. Amen. Joseph understood that in those seasons of change, it's no grounds to live unfaithfully. But it is important to hold fast to your faith all the more. That leads me to point number 2 this morning, and that is Joseph was a man of integrity. And I want to dive into this a little bit. I know we've heard about integrity a lot, but I want to specifically talk about being a self-differentiated leader. I know that's a complicated word, self-differentiated. All it means is that he was separate, he kept himself separate from the chaos in order to impact it. When we separate ourselves from the chaos, when we don't take things personally, and we're not getting wrapped up in the anxiety that surrounds us, it's in that moment that we can be in the world but not of the world. This is good stuff. If we're going to have an impact on the world, we need to be separate. Because if we're going with the same chaos and we're getting our emotions all twisted and tied up with everybody else, we're not going to be able to have an impact on that culture. So we need to be self-distanced or self-differentiated. Genesis chapter 39, 6-10 talks about Joseph's integrity. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care with Joseph in charge. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built. Okay? He was doing P90X for a number of years at this point. Okay? He was doing all of it. Saturday, everything, Shanti, he was rocking. Okay? He was well built, it says it there. Okay? And he was handsome. Lucky guy. He had it all. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. Here, Joseph maintained his integrity, and the outcome was that he was falsely accused and put in prison. Integrity in this season of change, when the floor is lava, is super important. Okay? It's muy importante. Okay? Spanish? You can say that with me. Muy importante. It's all the more reason. Think about what Joseph had to go through. He was thrown into a cistern by his brothers. Okay? He was beaten. He was sold into slavery into Egypt. If anyone could have justified his sin, maybe he would say, well, look, I'm here, I worked, I was sold into slavery, this happened, that happened. He could be bitter, he could be angry at God, that his whole life has shifted around. Instead, he remained faithful. And here he's in Potiphar's house, and he's put in charge of everything. He's basically in charge. Except for Potiphar himself, there was no one else greater in his house. And he could have said, you know what? I'm running the show over here. I deserve some perks. This is okay. This behavior is okay. You know what integrity is? Integrity is the refusal to compromise. Integrity is the refusal to compromise who we are as a person. It's a refusal to compromise what God has called us to be and do in this world. It's a refusal to compromise on the values that He's instilled in us. And Joseph understood that in this moment of change in his life, that it wasn't an opportunity to compromise, but all the more reason to stay strong and to stay and to keep his integrity. And so what we need in this season of change, brothers and sisters, is we need to be men and women of unwavering vision, to know that what God has called us to do, that we can get peace knowing that He's going to bring it about in our lives. And number two, we need to be men and women of integrity and not think that this change means everything's up for grabs and we can do what we want. No. Are you here? Say amen. Amen. Joseph faced jealousy, hate, betrayal, slavery, harassment, defamation, disrepute, and now, because he was faithful and kept his integrity, he was rewarded. No, he wasn't rewarded. He was thrown in prison. Has that ever happened to you? Maybe not thrown in prison. Maybe not have your name on the front page, reputation and disrepute. But has that ever happened to you where you held your integrity, you did what was right, and it cost you? A job, a position, a deal, a relationship. God has a way of keeping track of these things. But here, Joseph, I just want to recap. He all he did was share his dream, and because of it, his brothers hated him. They threw him into a cistern. He was sold into slavery. He's got to be thinking, God, it's you who gave me this dream. It wasn't me. All I did was share it. All I did was begin to go in that direction. And all of a sudden, I find myself in this situation. And here I am, being absolutely faithful in Egypt, not complaining, not taking any perks for myself, but just doing everything I can, working really hard, being faithful to the situation and the context in which you called me. And when I do the right thing, it costs me, and I get thrown in prison. The amazing thing is, we never hear Joseph complain, not even once. Integrity is the decision to refuse to compromise. In prison, Joseph, again, he found himself in a world that was changed again on him. And this time he works even harder. He finds favor in the eyes of the jailer, and so the jailer puts him in charge of taking care of the inmates. Is this interesting for you? You're still awake? If you want to sleep, it's okay. Listen, we all need it. And these seats are really comfy. Joseph is there, and he's put in charge now of taking care of these prisoners. And he's not even thinking of himself. He goes up to the chief baker and the chief cupbearer, and he looks at them, and they're seeming sad. They have sad faces. And he's not concerned with telling his story about how he was betrayed and how he was harassed and how he's an innocent man. When you keep your integrity before God, you don't have to prove yourself to Him. I don't know who that's for today. You don't have to waste time trying to prove yourself. But He doesn't waste any time trying to justify Himself. Instead, He turns to the cupbearer, turns to the baker, and says, hey, I understand. His concern for others, even in that place of imprisonment, is a model for all of us. And so what happens is they begin to relate the reasons why they're so distraught, because they've had these dreams, they don't know how to interpret it. Joseph interprets it, it happens exactly the way he says, and then they both escape. And guess what happens to Joseph? Joseph is immediately put in charge of Egypt. No. He stays in prison for 2 years, 24 months. I don't know how many hours and days that is. It's a long time. Was that 2 years even really necessary? Sometimes we face things that have really nothing even to do with us, but God is preparing situation for us to walk into. He won't bring us into it until it's ready for us to get there. Joseph remained in jail for 2 additional years until one day he was brought before Pharaoh. See, Joseph was secure in himself, who he was, his values. Joseph didn't waste time feeling sorry for himself, but got busy working in the new world and in the new context in which he found himself. Has that been your experience in this whole COVID? You spent some time worrying, you spent some time thinking and being concerned, and we can do that, and I'm not saying that's okay, to a certain extent, but don't stay there. It's time to get busy. It's time to get to work, amen? It's time that we say that by the end of this, we are going to exit. When the dust settles, when the lava pools and hardens, when the world is reformed, we are going to be in a position of strength. Somebody say amen. Joseph knew that the experiences he faced was not his fault. He was a self-differentiated leader. He separated himself from the chaos in order to impact it rather than be impacted by it. We are called to be in the world, but not of the world. And we do that by taking ourselves out of the equation. Ultimately, it's not about us. Let me tell you a quick story. I saw this on YouTube, and it's a young man. He's now 29 years old. His name is Ross Capiccioni. I hope you're not saying that right. He's from Detroit. And in 2007, he was a 17-year-old kid, going to high school, skateboarding, having fun. You know, he was a junior. And so one day, this schoolmate, acquaintance / friend that he's known for almost a decade says, hey, you got a car, can you give me a lift to where I need to go? And so Ross asked him, okay, well, which side of Detroit is it? For those who don't know, there's certain areas where it's very dangerous, so dangerous that the police do not even go. I don't know how it is now, but in 2007, that's what it was like. Okay, we're talking about the place where Eminem is from, okay, 7 mile, 8 mile, around that area. So that's the east side of Detroit. And so Ross said, no, I cannot go to the east side of Detroit. It's crazy, you know, not gonna do it. And this young man, over a number of weeks, kept asking and said, okay, look, I'll give you $30 for gas, don't worry about it, you know, just take it. And so finally Ross says, you know what, okay, we'll make it a day trip. It's in the middle of the day, no problem, I'll take you to east side Toronto. They drive down to where this house is, there's a laneway, they pull into the laneway behind this house. The kid gets out of the car, Ross gets out of the car. All of a sudden, this kid pulls out a shotgun and shoots Ross, hitting him in the arm. His arm, he's like, did you shoot me? Because his body's in shock, he's not even feeling anything. He can't move his arm. All of a sudden, the kid pumps the 12 gauge back again, shoots him again in the chest, putting a hole the size of what we all eat our oatmeal out of. Okay? A big soup bowl right in his chest. At this point, Ross drops to the ground. He's like, he's stunned, he's shocked, he can't believe it. What's happening? This doesn't make sense. I've done nothing to deserve this. All of a sudden, he feels the barrel of the gun in the back of his head. So with every sort of impulse and reaction of all he can muster at this point, because he can barely move or talk or do anything, he shifts his head, the gun goes off, and grazes his entire top of his head. At this point, he collapses, he's bleeding profusely, there's blood everywhere, and all Ross sees as he looks up is he sees his car being driven away by this kid who just shot him. Doesn't know what's going on. He tries to pick himself up. He can't. This was a part of the story that I liked. All of a sudden, he heard a voice. It's like Ross. He couldn't. He felt hands lift him up, push him towards the street. There was no one there. He finally makes his way to the street. As he gets to the corner, he collapses. Someone sees him and says, hey, don't worry, just stay here. You know, an ambulance is on the way. And he was in a coma for a couple of weeks or so, and finally he comes out of it. The nurses were screaming, "He's awake! He's awake! He's been shot." It was a miracle. He was dead on arrival at the hospital, and the doctor who was there said, "You know what? I'm here. Let me give it a try." He tried. He resuscitated him and pulled him from death, and then eventually he recovered. And so you're all probably wondering exactly what I was wondering at this point in the story. And that is, why? Why did this happen? As it turns out, this kid was trying to get initiated into a gang. And the price of initiation in order to get into this gang was killing some innocent bystander. At 17 years old. Experiences that he's known for a decade. That kid just wanted to fix it. It had nothing to do with Ross whatsoever, but from that moment his life was altered and changed. Incredible story. And he went to court and finally, faced a long sentence in court and got arrested because they caught the guy. In any case, it's just to remind us that sometimes situations happen that have nothing to do with us. People are dealing with things, they're dealing with anxieties, especially in this tense environment in the world, and we all need an extra measure of grace in this hour. Because people are dealing with a number of different things. Everything's new for people. There's all these anxieties, and sometimes we were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it really had nothing to do with us. There's another sort of anecdote story that I like to tell, and it's this idea of a man who's walking down the hallway with a cup of coffee, and someone comes along and bumps him, spills the coffee, and the question comes from the storyteller and asks, "Why did he drop coffee?" He says, "Oh, well, because he got bumped," right? It's the answer. It's normal. He dropped the coffee because he got bumped, and the storyteller would say, "No. He dropped coffee because he had coffee in his cup." If he would have had something else, he would have dropped something else. What happens to us, what comes out of us, has a lot to do with what's inside of us. If we have all kinds of anxieties coming on the inside of us, if we get bumped, that's what comes out. But if we have the peace of God, if we have the assurance of our place in God, who we are, if we are secure in ourselves, if we're a self-differentiated leader, if we are separate from the chaos, if our eyes are fixed on God with unwavering vision, that even when trials come, even when we get bumped by the world, even when things happen to us, the only thing that comes out is grace upon grace. And this is what we need in this hour. Thirdly and finally, Joseph was not only a man of unwavering vision, he was not only a man of integrity, but Joseph was a man who reframed his experience. After all that happened to Joseph, after all that he endured, he said these words in Genesis 45, verses 4 through 8. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." That is the intimacy of relationship. When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now, do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there's been a famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing and reaping." Verse 7, "But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So that it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt." Joseph reframed all that happened to him. He didn't give in to bitterness and unforgiveness and pain and say, "Woe was me," and felt sorry for himself, even though we would all say that that would be justified. Even though we could all empathize with Joseph's story. But instead, that wasn't the narrative that Joseph wanted to tell himself. That wasn't the story he was going to tell himself about himself. He was going to say, no, it wasn't your plan, even though you did those things to me. See, he's not denying that it happened. He's still in reality that it did happen. But he's saying God had a purpose in it all. And so it wasn't you who sent me here, it was God. He used reframing. And as we face this world of discontinuous change, we need to be men and women of unwavering vision. We need to be men and women who walk in integrity, know our values, know the path ahead, stick to it. And we also need to learn how to reframe what's happening to us. I talk to people all the time and ask them how they're doing through this situation. Some are facing a lot of difficulty, and some of them have already begun the work of reframing. But you know, I couldn't control what's happening on the outside, so I'm taking this time to really invest in my family. You know what? My business is closed, but I'm taking this time to really pray and seek God and take time. Because God has afforded this Sabbath rest, as they call it. Amen? Have you already began to reframe this whole scenario? To say that I don't understand it, but you know what? God knew this was going to happen. It had to happen. You know what? He's going to see me through. He's going to be faithful because my God is ever true. Amen. In another chapter, and this is the final couple of passages for this morning, Genesis 50, he repeats it again in verse 18. This was after Jacob had died. Joseph's brothers were afraid now that their father was passed away, that this was the moment where Joseph was going to take revenge upon him for all the hurt and sorrow that he brought into his life. So in verse 18, his brothers then came, threw themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Joseph was a self-differentiated leader who practiced reframing. To say that all that has happened to me has been by the purpose and plan of God. Is that your testimony today? Can you say, you know what, I've been through difficult things. I've been through things that maybe didn't make sense at the time. But looking back on it now, I can say with every ounce of faith in me that God was at work. You know what? 2017 was a real nightmarish year for me. And going through it was hard. On the inside, on the outside. Maybe you've had a year like that, maybe you've had a few. I empathize with you. But I can say now, God used that moment to shape me, change me. You know, people ask, oh, you're headed to the military. I went through boot camp a couple of years ago. And we always say the same thing about boot camp. It's always the greatest experience we live through that we never want to live through again. Because when we're going through it, it's hard. When we're going through it, it's tough. It's challenging, it's difficult. But at the end of it, those scars that we have become a badge of honor. When you think about the difficulties that you faced in your life, when you think about the hard times, it's very possible that now you look back on it and say, yeah, you know what, it was difficult what I went through. It was hard. That relationship was difficult. That situation. But you know what? Everything that's happened to me is what I am doing. So I'm going. And I'm going to choose the story that I'm telling myself today. To say that, you know what? God was with Joseph. God was with him. If God was with Joseph in Egypt, in the house of slavery, in the place of a global famine, you know what? God can be with us too. Amen? God has a plan. He is working it out. God has a vision for your life and my life. Our destiny has been written in heaven, and every single person he justifies, he will one day glorify. Romans 8:28 says this, one of the most quoted verses in all of Scripture. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. This verse is either true or it isn't. All things God works for the good. All things for the good of those who love him, called according to his purpose. For those God foreknew, he has also predestined to be conformed to the image of the Son, so that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those he predestined, he also called. And those he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified. Brothers and sisters, our destiny is written in God. He will bring it to pass. He has a plan. He has a purpose. It doesn't matter what the headlines say. It doesn't matter the shifting sands of our culture and our time. What matters is that God spoke it and God will do it. Amen. Manny Koshman is an Iranian-American real estate investor and entrepreneur who faced all kinds of adversity, being betrayed, backstabbed. And he says this, I love the way he says it. He says, everything happens for us, not to us. When you trace his life, after all the difficulties that he went through, it was water off the duck's back and he moved forward. Didn't waste any time in unforgiveness. Didn't waste any time in hurt or bitterness. Instead, he decided, I'm going to move forward. And because of that, he's very successful in what he seems to be success. The ultimate example of reframing, we see this in the cross of Christ. I'm going to close with this. What happened to Jesus on the cross was horrible. But God reframed it. And now when we see the cross, we don't see the brutality we see. Will you reframe the story you tell yourself about yourself? What is the dominant narrative? You know, I've been listening to a song in the last little while, and I'll encourage you to check it out. I just want to read to you the lyrics and I'll close in prayer. It's from a guy named Danny Goki. It's called New. This got in deeper than yesterday. Take on the morning like your soul's been new. Roll down the windows, let your cares blow away. Good things are yours to claim. You don't have to wait. All across the sky, your mercies rise, and the future's bright, because this is a new day. Everything's bursting with hope, coming alive in this moment. You've got a freedom, not looking back anymore. Open your eyes. It's coming. This is a new day. The old has gone away. This is a new day. Don't let it slip away. Verse 2, he says, go on, reignite impossible dreams. This is the moment. Become the one you never thought you could be. All across the sky, your mercies rise, and the future's bright. Love hasn't given up on you. Love is making the old ways new. Today and every single day, love hasn't given up on you. Let's close in prayer. Father, this morning, thank you for everyone in this room, and thank you for everyone watching online. Lord, our world is subject to change. Lord, we want to come out of this whole season of change in a position of strength. Help us to be men and women of unwavering vision. To know the dreams that you have for us are secure in you. That we can trust you for our future and for our hope. Help us to be men and women of integrity. Help us to not take things personally, but understand that a special measure of grace is required for this moment. Lord, we trust you with our lives, and we are asking that you help us not only to have unwavering vision, not only to be men and women of integrity, but help us, Lord, to reframe all that's happened to us. Help us reframe all the scars in our hearts. And say, Lord, even though we don't understand it, we can say that you were with us the entire time. You saw all that was happening. You can write a new story. Today is a new day. Don't let it slip away. Thank you for this time in Jesus' name. Amen. Next week, we continue with part 2 of our series, Subject to Change. We're going to be looking at the life of Jacob. Hope to see you all there. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Hi.